In today's video, we take a deep dive into the villains of the base set for Power Rangers, Heroes of the Grid. Let's take a look. First up, we'll look at the foot soldiers within the base game of Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Here we have your Putty Patrollers and your Super Putty Patrollers. I'm starting off with these two because, like the Power Rangers, they have an identical card. With the exception with the Power Rangers, with their power card that is universal to all the Rangers, there is one of that card for everybody. Here we have two of each. This card is identical for either one, for your Super Putty Patroller or your Putty. Dealing 1 damage, increases damage by 1 for each foot soldier in this location. This is a pretty powerful card because you have to notice the wording on the card. It is for each foot soldier, not for each putty, not for each super putty, not for each mastodon warrior, whatever it may be. This is for each foot soldier. So it doesn't matter which version you are playing. It doesn't matter which expansions you have in there. If you have these guys on here, they might be in there. So that can do you the 1 damage plus 1 for every foot soldier in there. I believe your max foot soldier count in an area is 6. So you are looking at a potential 7 damage for a 1-hit, 1-shot 7 damage. That is huge. This is one of those cards that you are definitely going to want to have to look at and pay attention to because you definitely don't want this one going off. Here we have the Putty Patrollers. I thought I would start off by going over the anatomy of their cards, where you can see the name of the card, the type of foot soldier, the health of the foot soldier. Additionally, this shows if it has guard on it or not, but that guard keyword will also show up here within the keywords, assuming it has it. Then we have the different symbol. As we can see, for the foot soldiers, we have that symbol right there. I'll make sure I point out the symbols for the monsters and bosses as we get to them. And finally, we have the text for the card. These are what happens when the card goes off, with the only exception being that if it is a passive card, it always goes off. The back side for our Putty Patrollers is as such. Additionally, with the foot soldiers, you have corresponding location cards. Within the base game, there are 4 total locations. And the way that they have divvied this up is 2 locations have putties on the back, and 2 of them have super putties. The ones for the putties are the Ernie's Juice Bar and the Angel Grove Park. Both of them, or in fact all 4, have a total of 5 cards, where you have one foot soldier card, 3 2-foot soldier cards, and then 1 3-foot soldier cards. Here is a close-up look of that miniature. And now onto the cards. This Putty, or this foot soldier, is one of our most basic villains within the game, and their cards go to show as suit. They are designed where there are 4 different cards, one of which we have already gone over, which is that common card between the 2 different foot soldiers. 2 of the cards there are 3 of, and the other 2 there are 2 of. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first. We have Cannon Fodder. It is a health card that also has the guard, and it deals 2 damage. Again, this is a pretty easy card to get around. It doesn't hit you by a whole lot. There's probably a pretty good chance with this one that the card that you use to block it will even go to the bottom of your deck. It's really not doing you a whole bunch of damage. This is definitely one of those cards that, you know, if you need something to hit, you can probably let this one hit, so you can deal with some of the more pressing matters. But even here with most of the foot soldiers, as long as you go into it with a solid game plan, you probably can get through a good bit of these guys just going down the line. The next one is easier to kill, but gives a little more of a damage point with 3 points of damage, but he only takes 2 things of health. These 2 are kind of like opposite cards, if you'll notice, where one is dealing 3 damage while it is being able to, you know, take 2 points, where the other one is dealing 2 damage, taking 3. They're pretty much an offshoot of which one is the more difficult one. This one will definitely do you a little more damage, but it is a little harder to hit, while this one, again, is a little harder to take out, but it does not hurt you as much. So, of course, this is the one that I would always want further, you know, closer down the line, because if you are having to prioritize your attacks in any way, and you know something has got to hit you, you definitely would want this one over this one. Of course, being that it does have the guard, you do need to keep that in mind, because you will have to take it out before you can attack either of those cards on either side of it. Next, we have our passive card for our Putty Patrollers. Come on. There we go. And while this card is in play, each time another enemy card deals damage, increase that damage by 1. Again, this is a 2 health card, so it is a very easy to take out. It can just be one of those annoying cards, especially if you have this and the swarm attack out at the same time, because now you're talking about this guy giving a potential up to 8 points of damage, and that can always be devastating. Up next, we have the second foot soldier within the base game. Like the Putty Patrollers, the Super Putty Patrollers have 2 corresponding districts or areas. We have the Industrial District and Angel Grove High. Just like the Putties, the card types are the exact same, where you have 1 Super Putty card, 3 2 Super Putty cards, and 1 3 Super Putty cards. Now, at first glance, you might think that that is a detriment in the game, that you could possibly try to skew things one way or the other. But if you remember, when you are playing, it doesn't matter what putty or what foot soldier is on the back of the card, because when you flip your cards over, this is what's being deployed, but the top card of the deck is where they are going. So here, even though the back of this card is the Super Putty, if this regular Putty's Angel Grove was the next one up, then he is going on that Angel Grove location. Again, it is one of those very interesting ways for placing units on, placing foot soldiers, monsters, bosses, what have you, on the field. That's a very unique system within the game that I like quite a bit. Let's go ahead and take a look at that miniature for our Super Putty Patrol. He is a 3-arm, 2-head, massive putty, and does look pretty good as what you might see from the show or movies. I do like him a good bit. Again, like your Putty Patrol, he is just a foot soldier. These cards are not that hard to get by, but he is a slight step up from the regular Putty Patrol. Our first card, like the Putty Patrol, they are dealt out in the same way, where we have 4 different cards, 3 of the easier cards and 2 of the slightly 4 foot soldier more challenging cards. The first card that we have is Engulf, right there. It has 2 keywords, Fast and Guard, a health of 2, where its ability is Drain 1. This is not that tough of a card. I actually prefer this one to come up than even a lot of the just regular putties, because as long as you go into your battle accordingly, it's usually pretty easy to get by just the loss of 1 energy. That is not that big of a deal. Additionally, being that this is your Fast Guard combo, for the Ranger's point of view, that is when you're dealing with double abilities, where Guard has an additional ability to go with it, this is what you would prefer, because that Fast is going to push it up to the front. With the Guard, an additional part of that being that it cannot guard itself. So even if 2 or 3 of these come up, they're going to be pushed to the front. They can't guard themselves. So you're really only looking at this card being able to guard or assist 1 other card. Whereas if it was just a lone guard card and it came up in the number 2 or 3 spot, it is protecting 2 different cards. Next up, we have the Putty Pummel. 3 health, dealing 3 damage. Again, just a very simple, basic card. At the 3 health, it is getting a little more difficult to take it, to one-shot that card. But there are so many abilities within your Rangers to add die, to add attacks, to up things, that even here, we're really not dealing with too much. Next, we have Regrow. There we go. This is a 2 health card, so again, it is one of those extremely easy cards to deal with, but it is quite annoying if you were to let this one go off, with its ability being to deploy 1 Super Putty Patroller to this location. Of course, you will have to abide by the location rules. If you are, say, panicked, then you would have to move it along the lines, but still, adding 1 Super Putty to your field is quite detrimental, especially if you are looking where you are trying to unpanic something, you are looking to kill the remaining foot soldiers, monsters, you're trying to finish everything off in that location, and then all of a sudden this one comes out. Because it does not go into the battlefield, it just goes into the location. So that means on your next turn, you will then have to deal with this additional Super Putty. Unfortunately, what that would also mean is if both Regrow and Swarm Attack are out and this one comes up, all of a sudden you are making this guy more powerful, because you are adding foot soldiers to the location that this card is on. So you're increasing its damage this round. Up next, we have the monsters within the base game. I thought I would first start off by showing the anatomy of the cards. They are very similar to the foot soldiers, where you have the name of the card, the monster you're dealing with, the health, and if it has that guard ability. Where the main difference here is the icon, where here we have this footprint, and that is the icon for monsters. Here we would have the abilities, if there are any, and then of course that card ability in general. One of the differences here between foot soldiers and monsters is their foot soldier card, or their monster card. All monster cards have the same back. There is that. For the Pudgy Pig, here we have the front. So once again, this one comes up where if when you are playing and you were to come up, you would flip the card. You would say here, okay, I am adding my one Putty Patroller. Oh, but the next one is a monster. That means Pudgy Pig is also going, and they are going to deploy at the Angel Grove Park. So there's, again, a very interesting way in which they do that deployment of characters, and I like that a whole lot. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at his miniature. And I decided to start with him because he is a little different than most of the other monsters. Most monsters have a specific card count of 3 or 4 different cards, where you have your main card, which there's only one of, or your power card, which there is only one of. Then you have 2 mid cards, which there are 2 of each, and then you have a lower card, which there are 3 of. With Pudgy Pig, however, he only has 3 different cards, where we have 2 cards that have a quantity of 3, and we have 1 that has a quantity of 2. Again, making him a little unique, where he only has those 3 cards, and his power card there are actually 2 of. With that being said, I do find him to be one of the weaker monsters here within the base game. If I'm looking to start off a game or teach someone, I'm definitely wanting to put Pudgy Pig in. He is a little easier to manage than some of the other monsters. Let's go ahead and do a closer look. His first card, and again, I kind of laid these out a little fun, where I kind of did it kind of for his miniature, where we have the butter knife cutter, we have his ravenous hunger, or where he sucks everything up into his mouth, and the salad fork stab. I've kind of kept with that layout and his miniature, just to have a little fun with it. In most instances, you will see I will lay out the cards of what I think is the hardest, or the weakest to hardest, where the power card will be the last one we look at. Up first, we have the butter knife cutter. It is a 4 health card. Deal 3 damage to 2 different rangers. Again, that is a very powerful card. If you're lucky, you'll be able to get by with just 2 cards to go through. But the fact that you're having to do this to 2 rangers is what makes this a little more difficult. One of the beauties of it, though, is it doesn't say what we're targeting, so it is just whatever 2 rangers of your choice. Definitely what could have made this more difficult is if they added a keyword in there like lead ranger, something along those lines. That is just another one of those reasons why I put him a little lower on the monster difficulty. he just gives you a little more of your choice of where you are locating, where you're putting some of that damage. Up next, we will go ahead and take a look at his next easier card. There we go. And here we have Salad Fork Stab. It is a guard card. Deal 4 damage to the ranger with the most cards in their hand. So this is kind of an example of what I was talking about here, where this one lets you choose where that damage is going. Here it is being a little more specific, where it is trying to weaken your character, because usually the more cards you have in your hand, the less cards you have in your deck, the more likely you are to really do some damage to that ranger. Finally, we have the Ravenous Hunger. It is his only fast card, which means this will go to the front of the pack. And it is passive, so even if you let this kind of just go by, it's still going to be hitting you every round, which makes it a little more difficult to deal with, and something you definitely are going to want to, look into with its ability of, while this card is in play, Rangers cannot play cards with energy cost greater than 0. That means you're going to have to want to go into this guy with characters that let you do multiple small hits, little things like that, that have a whole bunch of those low cost cards, because with there being 2 of his power card, the likelihood of this one coming out is pretty high. It's going to move up to the front of the pack. Luckily with it being passive, it's not going to do anything. This one will hit, go, because it's technically doing something every single round. Because as you know, with the fast, the villains, foot soldier, whatever, will go first. So it's also causing you to lose a turn for your rangers, because where your rangers usually go first and go last, here he is going to go first. So again, it's something you definitely want to have to look at, but with a health of 5, it's going to be pretty easy to get through. Again, as long as you know what you're doing, plan accordingly, and know which rangers really to go in with this guy, that you're definitely going to want to go in with ones like your yellow ranger, who is able to do multiple small hits, that have a lot of those good 0 damage type cards. Up next, we have Madame Woe. Here is her location card. Once again, like all the others, they have the same back. And then her miniature. She now starts that common card count that you will see within all the other monsters, where you have a 3 quantity card, 2 quantity cards, and then 1 quantity power card. She is a little interesting, where 2 of her cards are fast, where the other 2 have guard. That makes her a little unique, wherein her guards will only ever be able to guard 1 other card, with some exceptions, but we'll get into that in a minute. First up, we will look at Deadly Claws. It is a health 3 fast that deals 4 damage. Being that she has 3 cards here and her other fast is a 2 quantity count, the likelihood of this guy coming out is going to be fairly high, which means she's going to move up to the front of the pack, which means you are going to lose that initial turn with her, and have less rounds of attack to deal with. So while her health is a very manageable 3, the dealing 4 damage, now you're starting to get into a little iffy territory, because we're talking about a 1 hit here, 4 points. We're definitely going to be going through multiple cards, but hopefully if your luck prevails with what your draw is, that last card will hopefully go right back down to the bottom of your deck. But again, with her, one of the more deadly parts is all of the fast that's in here. Definitely moving her up to the front of the pack, so she will hit you first. So not only dealing that initial 4 things of damage, but taking away one of your attacks, which is one of those things that's not written here, not written anywhere, but that is a very devastating ability all on its own, that loss of an attack. Up next we have the Braid Lash. It is a guard card, deals 3 damage and drains 1 energy. This one is a little more difficult to hit, to take out. Of course, once you're dealing with that 4 health, you're starting to get into that territory where it is a little more difficult to 1 hit. 3 is a fairly manageable something to deal with, for you. And dealing 1 or draining 1 energy, again, as long as you play your cards right, go in there with the appropriate rangers, so you have things prepared to combat this loss of energy. This is definitely one of the easier cards to deal with. But the fact that it has the guard, that it is going to be blocking, at least a few things, it is a little more difficult to hit. It puts it slightly more difficult, more challenging to deal with than, say, the Deadly Claws. Her next card, another one of her 2 quantity cards, is the Breath of Death. It is a fast card, so like Deadly Claws, it will move up to the front of the pack. Each ranger must discard 1 random card from their hands. Now, one common thing you will see between the different monsters is whether they deal direct damage, whether they deal, a set, hey, I'm going to deal, direct damage, a set damage to an individual, or whether I'm going to do that damage to a group of rangers. To me, the group of rangers will always be your more difficult card to deal with, because if you want to play the quantity game and go in here with multiple different rangers to really be able to hit her with a bunch of what you have, the more rangers you have coming into here, the more damage, in a sense, she is going to do, because each ranger is going to have to discard that card. Since it's done by random, it could, again, be any card. You're not being able to pick out what it is. Again, it is up to that 4 health, so you are starting to have to deal with those rounds of health where 1-shots are not as prevalent, again, unless you're dealing with some of your stronger attacks. Finally, we have that difference with her that I kind of alluded to, where I talked about how, since both of her cards, we either have fast or guard, the fasts are going to move up, which means the guards are going to always stay behind the fasts. So there, and since a guard can't guard a guard, that first guard that's going to be coming up to the fast, it will only ever guard that first fast, with the exception of teleport. And this is a very interesting and unique card for Madame Woe. Guard and passive. Again, it doesn't really need that guard key phrase on there because of the wording here. While this card is in play, Rangers cannot deal damage to any other Madame Woe card, making this a very unique guard card. It is not only blocking the cards to the left and right of it, but it is guarding everything. So if this comes out, it is forcing you to put all of your attention on it. with a health of 5. It is going to be, for a monster, you know, one of the higher healths, is definitely something you are going to have to be able to deal with. You're going to have to look into it. You're going to have to pump some resources into her, just so you can start dealing with all of these. And the fact that you are pretty much guaranteed to get a fast out on the field, and in fact, let's see here, yeah, you will definitely get a fast, because here you would have 2, 1. There will always be a fast out there. You will also be losing one of your rounds of attack, making her quite tricksy and pesky and just all sorts of annoyance. Up next we have Bones. Here we have his location card. And let's go ahead, let's leave you out of this. And then his miniature. There we go. Very cool. Again, like the other 2 monsters, opposed from Pudgy Pig, he has the same layout where we have the 1 power card, the 2 medium quantity cards, and the 3 quantity of the slightly weaker card. Up first, let's go ahead and take a look at that 3 quantity card where we have Skeleton Sword. It is a fast guard, so once again it is going to go up to the, you know, the front of the pack, being so this guard will only ever block one other thing. It has a health of 3, so again it is a very easy, very manageable card. What makes this one interesting, it is deal 4 damage to the lead ranger. So this is kind of taking again that the ability of choice out of your hands, where he is dictating where these attacks are going. So you definitely want to keep in mind not as much, you know, who you're bringing, but which one you are setting up as that lead ranger, which one you are having to do that initial attack, because if this fast comes up, it's going to go to the front of the pack, you're going to lose your 1 turn, and that 4 damage is going to go to that lead ranger. Up next we have Eye Lasers. There we go. Again, it is a fast card, so it is going to run up straight up to the front of the pack. 3 health, again a fairly easy card to deal with. Deal 3 damage to 2 different rangers. Again, this is one of the where it gets, you know, interesting, being that you're dealing 3 damage to 2 different rangers. 3 damage is a fairly easy, fairly manageable attack amount. But you know, and the fact that it's also going to 2 different people, you know, allows you to you know, share the wealth a little bit, spread that out. Up next, we have another fast card for him, Grave Digger Slash. Now we're starting to get into the slightly more difficult ones, especially here we have a health of 5, drain 1 energy. Each ranger must discard the bottom card of their deck. Once again, once you're starting to deal with cards that hit multiple rangers, these will always be the cards that are more difficult to get around. The drain 1 energy again is usually it's a pretty easy to get around, but it's that drop the bottom card from their deck that you have to really watch out for. And the more rangers you have going into it, the more difficult this card is going to be, or the more damaging this card is going to be, because it's hitting multiple characters. Finally, we have his power card, Regeneration. This is one of the reasons why I have him higher up on the list. His cards in general are actually some of the easier cards to deal with, but it is this regeneration that to me makes him a more formidable boss, where with or a monster that is, where the other monsters, you know, if the power card hits, it's going to be damaging. It's going to do you some damage, but you can take it. This one, you will never want this card to hit. This one, you are always going to want to put all of your effort into. Hit this one first, because flip all defeated bone cards in this battle face up. They are no longer defeated. So that means if you've been working and you've been killing some of these cards, and all of a sudden this one hits, all of a sudden all of these cards that you just defeated are no longer defeated. You will never want this one to hit. Again, so while he himself might not be the most difficult monster to deal with, Madame Woe is definitely a more difficult monster to deal with. The fact that you will never want to let this hit, that this is a card you will never want to have to allow to go, to me kind of pushes him up over that edge just slightly. Up next, we have our final monster within the base game. It is the Nasty Knight. Here is his location card. Again, the same back. And his miniature. His miniature is one of my favorites in the game. I really do like this guy an awful lot. Very cool. Like the other monsters, with the exception, of course, from Pudgy Pig, he has that same 3-2-2-1 cards, where we have the one power card. The only difference is, from my personal point of view, and everybody can have their own opinion, his weak card is actually, I always put that in the number 2 spot. So here he has the two quantity cards, and then he has a 3 quantity card, which I do find to be a little more pesky. I have him up to the front of the list as the most of the difficult monster that you will deal with within the base game. Not as much for his power card, where in fact this power card is probably one of the weaker power cards compared to some of the other monsters. But his monster deck, his other 3 cards, are by far more difficult to deal with than the other ones. And since these will be what come up most of the time, what you're having to deal with most of the time, that makes him a much more formidable enemy that you'll be going up against. So up first we have the Nasty Slash. One of his 2 quantity cards with a health of 4 and deals 4 damage. Again, this is exactly what it says. It is a Nasty Slash. At 4 health, it is slightly more difficult to have to deal with, and dealing 4 damage, it will definitely eat up a little bit of your deck. But again, hopefully, luck prevail. You will at least be able to throw at least one of those down to the bottom. Up next, we have what should be his weaker card, because it is the 3 quantity card, though I again find this to be a slightly more difficult, because it redirects that damage back to you. So with all the other ones, you just kind of hit them, you know, do your damage, walk away. This one, you really have to be strategic about not only when you hit it, but how you hit it. After each ranger deals damage to this card, that ranger suffers the same amount of damage back. So with this one, you're definitely going to want to try to take that into account, and if you can, hit it with multiple rangers, multiple rangers doing multiple small little bits of attack. being that it's passive, this one can come. You wouldn't mind this one being near the front of the deck. It coming, it hitting, because it's not going to do anything to you when it goes. It will give you a little bit of a reprieve, especially if his power card shows up. But whenever you do decide to take this out, that ability is going to hit back at you and come back and deal that damage, that 4 damage back to you. Up next we have the Smash and Slash. Again, it is a 4 health card, like all of his. So each one of these, again, it goes into show why his cards are a little more difficult. Every single one is a 4. We don't have any 3s. We don't have because once you start getting above the 4, once you get in that 4-5, again, the 4-5 is probably about on the same level. But with every single one of them being a 4, every single one of them, you're going to have to put that little bit of extra oomph into it. Here, his ability is the deal 3 damage to a single ranger twice. That is kind of, at least they give you a little bit of a reprieve here. If it was just a deal 6 damage, that would hurt a whole lot. Because you're definitely going to have to be going through multiple cards within your deck to deal with 6 damage. Deal 3, that's a little more manageable. The only problem with that is, let's say you pull out a 2 and then a 3, all of a sudden you have just associated 5 points of damage to where you only need 3, and now all of a sudden you have another 3 and you have to go at it again, so you've kind of wasted 2 of those damages. Luckily that 3 would go down to the bottom of your deck, so you're not losing it, you're just not being able to take advantage of it that round. So it's kind of one of those give and take situations. It is a very interesting way of dealing out that damage. Finally, we have his power card, the Blade Beam. It is a fast card, meaning if this comes out, it will go to the front of the pack. It is his only fast card, so it will definitely be the first one. Deal 4 damage to the lead ranger and 2 damage to each other ranger. Again, that makes this a lot more difficult because it is going to hit everything. Everything is going to get hit. For me, cards that go against multiple different rangers are always going to be the more difficult ones to have to deal with. But even with that being said, the power part of this one, the deal 4, you don't have any say in it. It is saying it goes to that lead ranger. So once again, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to not only the team you have going in here, but also which one you design as that lead ranger. Because if this card pops, it's going to go up first. It's fast. It's going to hit you, and it's going to hit that lead ranger. And finally, we have the boss from your base set, Rita Repulsa. Here is her location card. Again, like all of the rest. Or like all of the bosses, that is. All the bosses cards have that same boss back. Again, they all have the same back, so that way as you grow in your collection and grow with different bosses, different monsters, you can put all of these together, randomize it, so you can randomly pick a boss, monster, what have you. First off, let's go ahead and check out the anatomy of her cards real quick. Again, it is identical to the monsters and the foot soldiers, with the only exception being the icon right there, where that is your icon for monsters, or for bosses, I'm sorry. Alright, first up, let's go ahead and take a look at that miniature. This is the miniature for the base game. Of course, the Kickstarter does have a Kickstarter exclusive, but I will save that for my Kickstarter exclusive deep dive. Where, again, all of that really does is it adds, a different miniature that you would be bringing in and playing around the field. It doesn't change her in any way. She is a little more unique or a little different from the monsters in the fact that she does have the same card count as the others with an 8 card count. The only difference is she has 2 kind of what should be power cards, 2 single quantity cards, and then 3 2 quantity cards. So she does not have that, so to speak, weak card. But really, if you're going to be honest with yourself, she is the boss. Every single one of these is a devastating card that is definitely going to take your best effort that you're really going to have to look into and deal with. Up first, we have Cruel Laughter. There we go. It is a health 4 with guard. Each ranger must discard from their hand the card with the most shields. Again, very difficult. Luckily, this one is a little lower on the range for me because most of her cards are fast. So most likely this is going to be pushed forward. So you will have a little bit of time that you can potentially wait on and deal with this before it potentially hits you, and hopefully be able to use some of those high valued shield cards. But even with that being said, this is a very difficult card. Once again, you know, cards that deal with multiple rangers is always going to be a more pesky of a card. But not only does this deal with each of your rangers, it deals with their best card or one of their best cards. Because usually the higher the shield, the better the card is. So it is going to deal with one of your better cards within your hand. Up next, we have another one of her 2 quantity cards, the Wicked Hex. It is a fast health 6. Stay in focus. There we go. Deals 6 damage to the ranger with the fewest cards in their deck. Again, she is targeting your weak source. And 6 points of damage, that is absolutely devastating. That is definitely going to eat up a bunch of your cards. And the fact that she is already targeting the ranger with the fewest cards in your deck, she is already going after your most vulnerable ranger. Once again, another thing that makes this card more devastating than maybe say some of the others is the fact that it does dictate where that damage is going. It is going to the one with the least cards, taking that choice of where it goes out of your hands, and she is dictating where it goes. That will always be a little more difficult. Up next, we have one of her 1 quantity cards, Shadow Binding. There we go. Deal 3 damage to the ranger with the most cards in their hand. That ranger must discard their entire hand. This is absolutely devastating. The only reason I have it a little farther down the line is because it does deal with 1 ranger. Most likely you're going to come into her playing the numbers game where you're going to want to go in with all 5 of your rangers, or depending on the type of game you have, you're going to go into it with all of the rangers you have available to you. And a lot of times 1 less ranger is not that devastating. So she might take out the 1, not necessarily killing him or her, but is probably going to take him out of the game because they've caused them to discard their entire hand. So unless you have something that allows you to add cards back in, this could basically be taking one of your rangers and making them null and void. 3 points of damage, that's pretty doable. You're not really dealing with that too terribly much. But with that being a 7 health, it's going to be a hard card to deal with, hard card to kill. And you definitely are going to want to kill this one because with the way the game is set up, where you are forced, because of the number of cards that you have to defeat the boss, you definitely are going to have to go through 2 rounds with her, and you definitely don't want this one to potentially show up twice. Being able to take out a ranger from your deck both times, potentially taking out 2 rangers, because you've discarded that first initial hand. You're definitely not going to want to do that again a second round. You're probably going to be coming in very, very low cards. You're not going to pull out that many cards going into that next fight. So she's definitely going to take up a bunch of cards, a bunch of your resources. Up next, we have Chain Lightning. Deal 4 damage to each ranger. With this being at 4 health, again, this is for a boss. It is a little easier to deal with, but what makes this devastating is that deal 4 damage to each ranger. Where most likely, again, you are probably playing that numbers game. You're coming in with all 5 of your rangers. So with that being said, if you were to think about it, 5 rangers come in, 4 points of damage are going out. This one card is dealing 20 points of damage. That is absolutely devastating. That's why, and then the fact that it's fast, it is going to be moving up to the front. Potentially, might be the first one you have to deal with. Might be a definite deal with. So it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hit you. Again, with her having so much fast in her deck, most likely, let's see, yeah, with there being only 2 here and then the 1 here, you will definitely always have a fast coming out. So not only are you going to definitely be hit with something, you are losing one of those points of one of those turns that you have. So you have less chances to attack her and kill her just from go. Very devastating. And then her final power card, her most wicked card for sure, and it just looks wicked as is, the Witch's Curse, a health 5. While this card is in play, the energy cost of all combat cards is increased by 1. Again, that's kind of why I moved this up to me to be a little more difficult. It's a passive. It's always going to be coming into effect. It's going to be down the line. So it's not going to come into play until later in the game. So the chances of it being up front and being something that you can let take, because it's not really going to do anything when it ticks in the beginning, to kind of give you a little reprieve, is probably not going to happen because it's probably going to be further down the line. So for most of the battle, it's going to be sitting there. It's going to be making all of your stuff more difficult to hit. Whereas we'll see some cards, mainly with the bosses or with the monsters, where they take away 1 point of 1 action point. Where here we're making everything cost 1 more. Very devastating. So there she is. Well, that is all the villains for the Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid base game. I hope this deep dive helped you to learn and understand a little bit more about each of the foot soldiers, monsters, and bosses that is found within the base game, and helped you to come with a plan of attack on going into your next battle. Well, until next time, guys, I'll see you later.